Hey Gearheads, and welcome to GT Garage Talk, a discussion about all things automotive. I am your host, Cory, and I've got a very interesting one for you today, in that we're talking about the destruction of cars, the crashing of cars, and the avoidance of crashing of cars. Yes, I am talking about vehicle safety. As a father myself, I've got a 6-year-old and my wife that as the primary driver of our family when we go places. I know that their safety is in my hands, but it is not just on me. Automotive engineers have done just amazing work in my own lifetime, perfecting and improving vehicle safety, from crashworthiness, how they survive a crash, the things and technologies built into the vehicles, like seatbelts, like airbags, like crumple zones. I don't think we talk about crumple zones quite as much as we should. I think it's back in the news a little bit because of Cybertruck and the fact that it's like a giant middle finger to crashworthiness and all other vehicles on the road, in that it's got an exoskeleton that like doesn't bend or buckle. I'm very confused on that one, how it passed certain safety regulations, but that's a story for another day, because today we're talking all things crash avoidance, crashworthiness, and vehicle safety with the head of vehicle safety from Mazda. We've had a lot of fun experience with Mazda. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I have been in every single one of their vehicles that they make, with the exception of the Mazda 3 sedan. I've been in the hatch. It's essentially the same vehicle, as long as you're not talking to the IIHS and how they rank their vehicles. But Mazda has been a very pleasant brand for us here on the channel. We generally like everything about them. Sure, there are some nitpicks, there's some things that leave us scratching our heads. But one of the things I don't dig deep enough into in the week that we have these vehicles, and I hope that I never have to experience firsthand, is all the built-in safety tech with them, the airbags, the 10 plus airbags in these vehicles, the various different systems from seatbelt pretensioners and things like that baked into the vehicle to keep the occupants safe. And so for that, we have the head of vehicle safety, Jennifer Morrison from Mazda, here with us to talk about all the work that they do. Their plan for reducing vehicle fatalities in vehicles, or in vehicle collisions involving a Mazda vehicle, down from just a ridiculously absurd huge number down to 0 by 2040. That is their goal. I could ramble on forever, but let's bring in Jennifer Morrison of Mazda. Jennifer, glad to have you on the podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Cory. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, as you know, my channel is very heavily based on family reviews, family experiences in vehicles. You and I met in person with my wife on a media drive. We talked a lot about safety while we were there. And that's what we'll be talking about a lot today, is Mazda's safety philosophy, how they go to market, what is important to the brand moving forward. So, real quickly, kind of give us maybe the elevator speech of where Mazda stands as to what avenues they're going to pursue with ADAS and all that fun stuff.
Oh, well, it's great. I'm happy to give the elevator speech to that. And I love it that you're coming from the family perspective, because I come from that as well.
Yeah.
I am a mom to 2 boys, and we're always thinking about how we develop our vehicles for safety. And like, as a parent, that is paramount to me, and making sure that we design our vehicles that have the safest possible systems to help avoid crashes. And that's what Mazda's really aimed at doing, is both crash avoidance and then provide really robust structures and safety mechanisms for crashworthiness in the event that crashes actually happen. All of that is driven from our safety philosophy of protecting the driver, supporting the driver in what they're doing, but really designing a human-centric approach so that we are supporting, not replacing the driver in crash avoidance, and then really protecting the driver in crashworthiness. That is our aim. That's our mission. And it really is a safety forward company. We make sure that all of our advanced driver assistance systems, all of those lights, those bells and whistles we see on cars now, the lights, the indicators, the warnings, a lot of that is completely investment through automakers like Mazda. There's no requirements for any of that. It's completely driven by our mission, and we know the real world data, right? So it really all comes from that real world data. We have over 40,000 crashes fatalities every year on our nation's roadways. That's a really scary number, especially for us as parents.
Yes.
So that is our aim, is to reduce that number, and we're doing so from the inside out, providing new advanced safety technologies, because we are set forth with a mission to get that number down to 0 by 2040.
Okay. Well, so Mazda is a brand with many different vehicles, ranging from the smallest Mazda 3 sedan and hatchback up to your two newest vehicles in the CX-70 and the CX-90. Those have really started kind of elevating the overall brand stature as a more luxurious vehicle. I know I mentioned to you before we started recording, I'm the new president of Texas Auto Writers Association, and we just had 90 at the event, and one of the biggest comments that I kept hearing about that vehicle was how great its interior was and just the overall presence it had. But with a vehicle lineup so diverse, from 3 to CX-30, CX-5, CX-50, what is kind of like the standard cohesive thread amongst all of those? I know you mentioned crash avoidance and crashworthiness are the two big pillars that y'all stand on.
Yeah, let me stitch those together a little bit. And let's not forget the MX-5 too, our Miata.
I mean, the iconic.
Right, we can't forget about that one, because there's safety built in every single one of our vehicles. So I'll touch first on crash avoidance. So basic features there, and I shouldn't even say basic, because automatic emergency braking, pedestrian automatic emergency braking, these are radar and camera based systems that look out in front of the vehicle and try to avoid any contact, either through a warning or an automatic brake application, between your vehicle and the vehicle ahead of you. Every single one of Mazda's vehicles have that as standard equipment in some form or another, all the way down to the MX-5, including that one, right? And that's actually part of a voluntary agreement that all automakers started in 2019, and that NHTSA just published a new final rule to make that even a more robust, higher speed performing requirement for those types of systems. That's in our vehicles voluntarily, and it's standard equipment. And of course, like I said, that's part of a voluntary commitment through the whole agency, not just Mazda. But where Mazda takes it even further is systems like our lane departure warning and lane keep assist, as well as our blind spot monitoring and our rear cross traffic assist. All of those technologies, standard equipment on every single vehicle, so that safety does not have to be a luxury for a family looking to get an entry-level Mazda 3 or a higher trim CX-90. It's that level of safety is going to be provided to every single one of our Mazda customers.
I like that. Safety does not have to be a luxury.
Right.
So many times as the technologies have grown and advanced and become more expected from consumers, I've watched as a consumer myself, thinking about lane keep, lane tracing, all that fun stuff. I remember going on to build and price sites and saying, oh, I had to option up to that. I have to get this trim or that trim to do that. And it could really drive the price up very quickly. So the fact that you see it, the way y'all see it, is safety doesn't have to be a luxury. You get that from Mazda 3, MX-5, all the way up to a loaded CX-90.
Right. And of course, there are some features that are what we consider more safety. Well, the safety features, once they're proven to be safe. And so the how we study that is we really do look at the real world crash data, and we look at how our features are being rolled out and what can prevent those technologies. What technologies can prevent crashes in a proven scientific way. And so the ones I've mentioned, the lane keep, lane departure warning, blind spot. Obviously, it's a great one for preventing side swipes. Rear cross traffic has been proven to prevent backup, even small fender bender, property damage, those kind of crashes. Those are really proven safety technologies. And as such, they're standard. There are additional features that are more like convenience features. You mentioned lane tracing. We call that lane centering. That's available in something that Mazda offers as Mazda radar cruise control, or cruising and traffic support. If you've driven that, it's on the higher trim Mazdas. It's that what we sometimes refer to as, if you're familiar with like the SAE levels of driving automation, it's the most advanced version of that that's on the road right now is SAE level 2. So those are optional. Those are kind of the emerging advanced technologies that haven't proven their weight in safety yet. But if they do, that would be something we would consider for standard equipment.
Awesome. Yes. So little bit of side note here. I literally on Tuesday got out of a test vehicle that we had for a week in the CX50. This is, I believe, the third or fourth CX50 that we've had. I've loved every single one that we've had. Some of the things I really like that y'all implement on that, that kind of bridges the gap between standard and optional. You had mentioned blind spot monitoring being standard. I love how on your optional head-up display that we had on our test model, you get that little visual warning in the actual head-up display that there's somebody in your blind spot. I wish more automakers would do that. You also give the visual warning on the mirrors and the audio warning if someone's in your blind spot and you put your blinker on. So listen to people that manufacturers are doing a lot. Use your blinkers for crying out loud, because there's a lot of stuff built in that really help, again, go to that crash avoidance aspect.
Right. And I don't know how anyone would drive a car these days that doesn't have blind spot monitoring. I know I can't. Right. Like I look for those cues, and it's also customizable. You can, depending on if you don't want the audible alert, you can customize that in your menu if you just want the visual. And for our lane departure warning, you can do even haptic alerts where your steering wheel vibrates. So, and those are customizable depending on the driver, depending on how you want to get alerted that there's that you're there deviating a lane, or if there's somebody in your blind spot. Yeah. I'm glad that you like the heads up display on that one.
Yes. Is that something that you can set to like driver profiles, so that, say, my wife, she historically likes as little invasive technology as possible, whereas I'm like, bring me all the things because I had to test it for work. So I turn everything on. She wants them all as off as humanly possible. Is that something that could be set to certain driver profiles?
Yeah, in our new CX90 and CX70, which is coming out just in a minute, it has the driver personalization system in it. So the 50 doesn't have that yet, but the 70 and the 90 do. And it lets you set up your profile, and all of your settings come along with it.
Awesome. Yeah. Yes. First of all, I just like memory seats. Like that's low bar for me, being a different height as my wife, but the more stuff you could kind of bake into that, definitely better when it comes to making the vehicle usable for all.
Right.
So
great for multiple drivers.
Yes. Weird anecdote that I'm just going to get your input and your opinion on. I don't remember it happening with 50, but in our latest test vehicle, you had mentioned emergency braking, automatic emergency braking being standard across the board. The funny thing is, my father-in-law drives a 2020 Ram 1500, and then we are in a different press vehicle, a Genesis GV70, and we have a 13-degree, I know this because of built-in incline meters on off-road vehicles. I have a 13-degree incline on my driveway. And certain vehicles, like the two I mentioned, will not back up down the driveway because you get to the base and it thinks it's going to run into something.
Right. It's seeing an impediment there.
Right.
Yeah.
Is your system one where you can temporarily disable? Like, how do y'all work around instances where perhaps it's getting a false reading, or like you said, you don't want to replace a driver, you're adding to? How do you kind of balance that?
Yeah, it really does come down to customization in the menu and being able to turn things on and off. Like some of our driving dynamics engineers, they don't want that lane keep
Hmm.
assist or that lane departure warning when they're going to take a windy mountain path at fun speeds, right? They want to turn that stuff off. And in this case, you mentioned like backing down a driveway where you know that some systems are going to give you an alert. You want to turn that off. So that's when you go into that customizing in your settings and you can disable just about everything.
Okay.
Like I said, none of these technologies are required yet, aside from the new one that where the government just published a new federal regulation, a final rule for automatic emergency braking and pedestrian automatic emergency braking. Now that doesn't come into effect until September of 2029.
Okay.
So until then, like all of these systems can be disabled, turn on or off, and even the new final rule, you will be able to turn some things on and off about that. So that's where it has to come in. Like we'll continue to negotiate with lawmakers if these things do become required, that our customers, for those reasons, and many others we haven't thought about, like there's all kinds of instances where maybe you don't want
Right.
that alert or that automatic intervention to come in, that you have to be able to turn it off just to suppress it for a little while.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm very glad to hear that because some manufacturers, I'll leave it unnamed, but you had to like stand on one foot and hold your arm out and do all these certain things to be able to turn everything off, as I joke. And the fact that you are able through Mazda, through the infotainment system, to kind of customize that and set it, that is a welcome uh, addition, especially in our situation where literally the vehicle that we have in the driveway right now that for testing does not so much like our steep driveway.
It doesn't want to get out of the
No.
driveway at all. It's going to be stuck there forever.
And so I was like, all right, how do I do this? And trying to turn it all off. It's fun learning all these new things with each new vehicle that we get. But yes, customization, being able to turn it off. It is good to know also from a lawmaker standpoint, none of it is mandatory yet,
Yes.
but
Yes.
that there are things on the horizon that lawmakers are looking forward. I know General Motors has famously said, Mary Barra has her three pillars: zero crashes, zero emissions, and zero congestion. I can't remember what year the target is, but that zero crashes thing is very much a priority for many automakers. And I know I took a note here. You want to reduce those fatalities to zero by 2040. And it is through addition of technologies like this, correct?
Right. Yeah. So our goal right now is that zero fatalities by 2040. And, notice that doesn't say zero crashes by 2040. There still may be crashes. It's hard to control for everything. And really that's in Mazda vehicles and in Mazda at fault type of crashes. So we want to make sure that we're controlling what we can, right? Protecting for what we can. And we're doing that through a safe systems approach, which is actually the U.S. Department of Transportation has led a safe systems approach through safe vehicles, which we can help contribute to, right? The safe vehicles part, but also safe roadways, safe people and the behavior, and in what we're all doing behind the wheel. Because to Mazda, the most important system in the car is still the driver.
Yes.
So we need to keep that in mind. Safer speeds and also safe emergency response when things do go wrong and we do need to have emergency responders respond to the side of a crash. So it's a whole entire systems approach, and that's how we're going to get to our zero fatalities goal through, like we were talking about earlier, crash avoidance and crashworthiness.
So, kind of leaning into those two newer models, your top tier models, CX70 and CX90, I know you introduced a lot of additional, we'll say, technologies in there. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, you even have a system monitoring the driver in those. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah. We have our new driver monitoring system in the CX90 and in the CX70, and it's a direct driver monitoring system. It's one of the terms the industry is using now to refer to the camera-based. So there's a small camera in the infotainment screen in the center there that's actually looking at the driver. There's actually two. There's one that's more daytime camera, and then there is an infrared camera that helps see through sunglasses and at night. So those two cameras work to measure things like eye gaze, blink rate. They're not taking any video images or recording any images for privacy purposes. But they are using data, just measurements of your face and what's going on, your eyes, the direction, the blink rate, and giving you warnings if the system runs its algorithm and thinks, okay, you're too tired, you're not looking at the road, maybe you're looking down and away for too long, hopefully not at your cell phone, and then give you an audible and visible alert to say, hey, eyes up, do you need to take a break? That kind of thing.
And then even further still, I know all Mazdas outside of, well, maybe MX-5 would be an exception as well, but CX-90 and 70 have the new full digital gauge cluster, whereas the other models all fairly well share the same, I believe it's a 7-inch digital screen. And from my time in 90, I remember one of the display screens you could set up there when you were using all the driver assistance stuff was it showed the CX-90 and then all the vehicles around the vehicle.
Like the boxes
yes.
surrounding you, right?
So that is new and emerging technology, like you said, that is a little more optional. But how is that evolving? Is that are we gonna start seeing that trickle down to smaller models? I know 90 and 70 are the big new ones, but are we gonna start seeing that kind of stuff in additional Mazda vehicles?
Yeah, I think we will. It's what drivers are expecting now. They like to see that almost live integrated view of themselves on the roadway in time and space with the vehicles around the little boxes that are surrounding them. And that technology is just getting better and better. The better cameras we're getting, the better sensors. That's all based on side radars, right? We have side radars in the front and the back of our vehicle. We have the front radar. We have our ultrasonic sensors, and we have lots more cameras now than we ever have on these vehicles. And so those all are working together and integrating and creating that image that you're seeing. So the better that's getting, the more precise it gets, and the more models we can put it in. So I'm glad you really like that. I really like it too, because in addition to like when you were talking about the blind spot alerts that you get in the heads-up display, you're also getting a visual cue of where the vehicle knows there's other vehicles surrounding you. So it's kind of, it almost feels a little bit like game centric, right? That you're in the game, you're driving along and you can see the vehicles around you, but it does help with your overall perception of time and space when you're out there driving on the road.
I've noticed, I always allude to it, that it is the vehicle letting me know that it knows what's around me. And
that's a great way of putting it. Right.
I've, again, my wife being sort of anti-technology, that is something that I'm sure that y'all enjoy implementing because it probably helps adoption rate of these features. And again, leading towards that zero fatalities by 2040. The more you have people using and implementing these technologies versus opting out of them through the infotainment screen, the more accurate, the quicker we will get to that hopeful position of zero fatalities by 2040.
Right. Yeah. And one of the things I do is I actually drive with that screen on in the CX-90, even when I'm not using the cruising and traffic support. It's really meant for when you're using the cruising and traffic support, so it automatically comes up for that. But you can actually change your settings to use it at all times. So I like that. I like the number rather than the dial, the dial look. So it just kind of depends on, again, customization. You can have it either way. So if you like more of a tech-centric person, like sounds like you and I are, or like your wife that just wants to have the regular dial, you can have it however you'd like, and it can be customized towards your preferences.
So I had to bring up the one sticking point that I know myself, some others have gotten to when it comes to Mazda vehicles is the interface with the infotainment system, with the controls of the vehicle. This may be a safety question. This may be higher up. It may be just an overall blanket how Mazda goes about things, but it is a touch-capable screen. But to reduce interactions and, again, have driver focus on the road, y'all have elected a majority of the functions are through the joystick. What is kind of the thought process there versus leaving the touch screen open all the time?
Right. And you really have to think about the way that the cabin of the Mazda is designed. The screen, the infotainment screen, is really a little bit out of reach, right? It's not for most people, if you're in the right position for the steering wheel, to have your hands on the right place in the steering wheel and really drive that human-centric feeling with both hands on the wheel, then the screen itself isn't really intended to be fully dedicated as a touchscreen. You see in some other models from other brands that they have a lower mounted screen where it's like reachable, touchable. So in Mazda's case, we prefer and really design the vehicle to be used by the commander knob. The round dial right there in the center. It took me a while to get used to as well when I first started driving Mazdas, but now I don't know how to live without it. And I love our volume, the volume button. There's just something about having that right there near my pinky finger that I can just go up or down quickly on the volume, depending on whether I'm listening to music or having to turn it down to yell at a kid in the bath, right? So that is the design intent of that cabin, is to use the commander knob and navigate that way. Now, we also understand that customers, especially when they're using Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, that they're really accustomed to touching that screen. Like, we all have the iPhones, right? The only way you interact with the iPhone is to touch a screen. So there's a native learn that we've all had in how to do a touchscreen with those interfaces. So just for those applications. So in most cases, I tend to drive with my Apple CarPlay on at all times. It's the screen that I like having up. I like having the multi-view where I have the map and whatever music's on kind of simultaneously. In that, you can touch it. And you have to go into your settings and say, like, that enabled. So default is even that. You can control it just fine through the commander knob. You really can. It is a learned trait. I think you have to become accustomed to that. And if, again, back to customization, if drivers don't want to use the controller knob, in those cases, we are allowing the touchscreen. It's a difficult conversation because there's part of me, that safety advocate, which I truly am above all things, not wanting people to be on their phones at all while they're driving or have any interaction, like really focus on the road. But there is also the reality that, people need to be able to, send a quick voice to text if they're going to be late, or do some, hopefully, very quick, not sustained, eyes off road communication and connection with the outside world. The thing we're trying to prevent is people picking up their actual phone and going handheld. That's what we'd like to avoid. I think you probably see it as often as I do. You stop at any light or in any traffic situation. Look, you don't even have to, there's every single car around you. And for my kids, and you have your kids in the car too, we're examples. I try to be a good example for them and have it tucked away, preferably out of reach.
Well, talking about the commander knob and things of that nature, another personal anecdote, having spent time in 50, we actually drove through so much weather. We took it from East Texas down to Southeast Texas, which was experiencing flash flooding, thunderstorms, all that stuff. And something I hadn't experienced in my multiple times in a CX-50 up until this point, driving through all that weather, is we got frequent weather updates on that screen as we were driving. And what made me think about it was, again, I had to look over at the screen. It was telling me something, read through that. So is that some safety technology outside of your scope of work, kind of leaning into here's some impending weather, be aware of the situation around you?
Yeah, kind of leaning a little bit into the connected vehicle and the data that's coming in. And I have also received some of those alerts. I do tend to, depending on the situation and how severe the weather is and how regular you're getting them. If you're in California, you might not be getting thunder, storm and flash flood alerts constantly. But out here on the East Coast, we certainly do in the summer. So it depends on what kind of alerts you want. And again, you can customize that. You can actually turn them off completely. If you find them distracting or if they're coming up too much in a known weather condition, the storms are coming, you don't need any more information on it, you just want to concentrate on the road ahead, you can just turn those off completely.
And then one other thing that you had said about the screen and the design of it kind of being out of reach, that it sounds like Mazda intentionally keeps that in the eye line of the driver, keeping it up, therefore making it more out of reach versus other manufacturers bringing them down low and close. So,
Yeah, it's a balance. I mean, your eyes can only stretch so far,
right.
right? Your field of view is only so much. And if you keep it up and high, you can keep it with, like you said, in the field of view and out of reach, which I still feel is it's a safe way to do it. Maybe, there's many ways though. There's the other approach is while keeping it low and within hand reach. I do think there's a safe approach to that too. It just depends on how you balance it and what information you display up on those screens.
I'm glad to know you can turn that off because, again, we were going through a known weather situation, and I'm like, my goodness, like, kept
Yeah,
popping up.
it can be aggressive.
Yep. All right, so from kind of pivoting from the technology side of things into like the physical hardware, the vehicle around you. One of your other standpoints was first was crash avoidance and then crash worthiness, and I know various manufacturers have different phrases for it. You've got crumple zones, you've got all this other technology and hardware baked into these vehicles. What are some things that are kind of standard across the Mazda lineup? And what are some things that I don't want to say because safety is not a luxury, but what are some of those other things that are kind of the emerging technologies that we'll see?
Well, so that was a really fun one for me to answer, Cory, because all of the crashworthiness is standard across the entire lineup, which is really something I get to be proud about. So let's just talk about the CX-90 and CX-70. They have essentially a very similar platform. The difference is that the CX-90 has the side curtain airbags that go all the way back to the third row. Right. So there isn't a third row in the CX-70, so it's a little bit of a different situation. But when we were designing the CX-90, it was so important for us to make sure that we were considering side impact safety for every occupant of that vehicle. And that's standard, of course, through the entire trim line. We do not change airbags by trim. It's standard the entire way through. It's a philosophy. It's also efficient right. A way to design and build vehicles. And one of the other really cool things about CX-90 and CX-70 is that they have 10 airbags. Right? Like gone are the days where we would put where people think there are 2 airbags in the car, like the frontal ones. Sometimes you'll see a movie and they just pop up the front ones. I'm like, well, that was a really old car if that's how that happened. Because now we have frontal impact airbags. We have knee bolster airbags. We have the curtains that I was just talking about. We also have side mounted airbags that are actually in the seat that come out to help for a side impact protection for the driver, front passenger, and the rear seat occupants. It's a lot of airbags, right? And that's just part of that overall advanced safety protection. Now, depending on the type of crash, maybe not all airbags deploy. The cars are really smart nowadays. We have all of the different accelerometers that can tell from what direction is the force coming and how do we protect. So all of that comes into play, and we get to do that crash worthiness across the entire lineup and across all the trims. Just load them up with all the best airbags. And I have to mention seatbelts too, because I think sometimes we forget that that is the most important safety device in your car. And they're not just regular seatbelts anymore, right? They don't just click in and they're not static. Really important in our in the rear seats of all new Mazda vehicles now. MX-5 doesn't count because it doesn't have a rear seat, right. But everything else, we have the pretensioners and load limiters in the rear seat because we had studied rear occupant injury and found out that it wasn't progressing at the same rate as front occupant injury. So the injuries we were actually doing a really good job of reducing injuries and fatalities in front seats with advanced airbag technologies. Well, you don't have the benefit of an airbag in the rear seat. So what can we do? We can actually design the seatbelt to be more forgiving and actually allow some load limiting of the chest to protect the occupants more. And now that technology has been deployed in all of our rear seats across the lineup.
One of those things that you never want to have to think about, but are in the back of your mind as you're making vehicle decisions and investing, because vehicle prices trending the way
Yeah.
everything has. That's
Yeah.
definitely, they say your home and your vehicle are your two biggest expenditures in your lifetime.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, they really are.
a lot of things go into that decision-making process. And so very cool to hear that there are still advancements being made in seatbelt technology, something that has
Absolutely.
seemingly been around for ever. I know 1986 here. I remember when it was just lap belts. I remember the automatic moving ones that.
Glad we don't do those anymore, but
Yes.
yes, those were around for a little while in the 90s.
I'm still trying to figure out even what the benefit was there. I guess if you always left it connected up top, you at least had that on you. But yeah, very, very interesting technology.
There's a lot of hindsight to that design. And we come at it now, we're like, why would anyone do that? But now, I mean, we're looking at it after knowing a lot that, we didn't know going into that. But yeah, it is interesting. The seatbelt and the front seatbelt use rates in the United States are well over 90, like even over 95% for people who sit in the front seat of a vehicle and buckle up. But the rear seat, it's dramatically less. And it's kind of confusing, and we're going to look at that data and go, oh, well, why is that the case? But you think about, you get in an Uber, you get in a taxi, do you always buckle up? I mean, I do, but I'm a safety person, right? So, and you're a car guy, so maybe we do, but not everyone does. And I think that's something that we need to change culturally as well, is that you got to buckle up wherever you are, especially if you're in the rear seat, because if you study physics, where is your energy going? If you get into a front impact, you're going into the back of your driver or your front seat passenger, and that's going to cause even more injuries. So thinking about the seatbelt as, putting it on, number one. And then, yes, of course, we have these cool advanced technologies now that have actually helped Mazda earn some really great ratings lately. There's a new front crash test from the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety. We call it Front 2.0. It's kind of our industry term for it, but it's their moderate front overlap test. They just launched it last year. It is so difficult. It's the most challenging crash test currently in the United States, and it has a rear seat occupant that we have to protect and make sure it doesn't have very high injury levels. And so Mazda has recently achieved the highest level, the good rating in that test. We're really proud of that. And we look forward to rolling out more models that have a good rating in that test. It really is thanks to the pretensioners and load limiters that we added to the rear seat of our vehicles.
Yeah, and in addition to that, we're talking a lot about actually buckling up. So some things I noticed from my time in Mazdas, most notably the 50 that I just got out of, the little warnings up above the rearview mirror, the visual indication that my son's still in the child safety seat. So I know he's buckled up because I had to cinch him in. But if I've got another adult or older child passenger back there, knowing, hey, that they've actually buckled up. And it appeared to me, I'll get the actual facts from you here in just a moment, but it appeared to me that there are sensors in those seats as well, that if somebody unbuckled as I was pulling into a parking spot or something, the vehicle started chiming.
Right. Right. So it's our seatbelt reminder system that helps you identify, just using the visual alerts, like you indicated at the top header there, whether there's somebody buckled in your seat. And you're right. Like if it detects the seat belt from that is unbuckled while you're still in motion and a door hasn't opened, so it's using door logic and seatbelt logic, the combination of just those two pieces of information, to give you an alert. And that has absolutely happened to me before when we were, especially drive longer trips. And my sons are, middle school, high school now, so they move around and like, oh, I'm gonna get this out of the back. I'm like, who unbuckled? You can start hearing it chime. Like, what are you doing? What's happening back there? It's great for parents. I definitely appreciate that. And like you said, adults too. Let's say you're an Uber driver and somebody's back there and they're not going to buckle up. You have information now that what their buckle status is.
So you had mentioned some crash safety testing. I'm on the IIHS website right now, and they have it broken down by winners of Top Safety Pick and Top Safety Pick Plus, and I'm sure you've got these all memorized. But just scrolling down the list, we've got the Mazda 3 four-door hatchback and sedan, both top top safety pick pluses.
Top of the top. We're
yeah.
very happy about it. Yes.
Let's see, midsize, large, luxury, small SUVs. We've got what do we got in this category? So CX-50 just got out of CX-50, so good to see that
Yep.
one's top safety pick plus, and CX-30 as well. Is CX-5 in that one? I know it's an older platform.
That's a great question. I know you're going to ask me the tough questions for it. It is not. That vehicle is not. In fact, we are going to hopefully be doing some press release on that one soon, because we had not gotten it tested to that new test I was describing, that
Right.
moderate front overlap 2.0, the more advanced one. In order to get those awards, you have to have tested to that, and we hadn't yet. So we have now, but it hasn't been publicized yet. So we're still waiting on that to become public. And also its front crash prevention system. In order to get that award, you also have to have either an advanced or superior rating in the pedestrian automatic emergency braking. So that one hadn't been rated in that yet. So we had a little bit more work to do for that. Still, I think that we'll have really good news to report when we get to publish the crashworthiness, but we have room for improvement on the crash avoidance for CX-5. Okay. No award for CX-5 this year.
All right. And then I see an interesting section here for CX-90. The gas-powered version is a top safety pick plus, but what caused the plug-in hybrid, the PHEV, just to get top safety pick? What was it missing out on there?
It's the same thing. That moderate overlap 2.0, the updated moderate overlap crash, hadn't been completed on the PHEV version yet. Okay. So we had to get that to dealers and get it tested. It's on the testing schedule. I have a test date for it. But as soon as it gets tested, we're hoping for, I think we have to have either an acceptable or a good rating. We're hoping for one of those. Obviously, we're aiming for the top one, and that will earn us, hopefully, the top safety pick plus for the PHEV variety too. Sometimes it's just a matter of timing and testing, getting the vehicles to dealers, getting them over to the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety to get them tested. I will actually be at that test. Have you ever been down there for a crash test before?
I have not. And
oh, you've got to come at some point. Come join us. I go down there a few times a year. You can actually feel the crash, like the impact, the percussion of it in your chest. It's like, oh, you can kind of feel it. Mm-hmm. I love bringing people down there and giving them, kind of a history behind why automakers really partner with the Insurance Institute to improve the tests, to continually advance them. And as much as it is a competition to get these awards, we see it as a really collaborative environment. So come down and check it out. Sometimes it's a beautiful facility, kind of in rural foothills of Virginia. But yeah, I'll be down there in a few weeks testing the CX-90 PHEV.
So that is another interesting one, because sometimes people just go to the website and they're scrolling down that list and they're like, oh, does my car make it? And very interesting, like, it hasn't been crashed yet. Like, they have not done all the testing. It may qualify, like you said, the PHEV will be testing soon, but without that data, they cannot certify it. And they aren't going to just assume that the gas version got it. They're actually going to say, okay, this is a separate model. So that's very interesting.
Yeah, sometimes they do let us do like verification data, because we also do a lot of in-house crash tests. Like we're crashing at least one car a day in Japan. As part of our research program. We have a beautiful crash testing facility, state of the art, in Miyoshi, Japan. So we use that, like I said, almost once a day, doing tests internally. And sometimes we can submit that verification data to the Insurance Institute, and they can look at it, verify it. We have videos, the crash test dummy injury values, and they are able to compare 1-to-1 and say, okay, we'll actually take this and give you a rating for it. But with this new test, this moderate front overlap test, because it is complicated and it's their newest test with that rear seat occupant, they're not doing any carryover between models right now. And for that reason, we have a little bit of delay trying to get all of these models tested. So we did the 90, and now we're going to do the 90 PHEV And we actually tested, since it was a new test, we had to do the Mazda 3 to that. And even Mazda 3, even our small car. So safety comes in all sizes. The Mazda 3 got a good rating in that new advanced test in both the sedan and the hatchback, which we had to test separately because I said there's no carryover between one and the other. Essentially, the same car for the most part. A few, measurements are a little bit different, but we got it for a good rating in the Mazda 3 sedan, hatchback, CX-30, CX-50, 90. Now we're just waiting for that PHEV to be tested.
And then 70 when it starts.
70 and 70 PHEV. I got 2 more cars to ruin this year.
Yeah, so talk about that for a little bit. What an interesting job to have, that like you are you get to destroy all these brand new vehicles, but for science and for safety.
It's for science, I promise.
Yeah.
And we don't necessarily always get to. The Insurance Institute has to purchase the vehicle independently from a dealer, and they, essentially, if we have nominated the vehicle, then we reimburse them for that cost. So a lot of people are like, "How much did this cost? Why would you ruin a beautiful new car?" And it depends on what's available on the dealer lot. Like we don't know if they're going to choose the lower trim, the middle trim, the higher trim. There's been cases where I have crashed a absolutely beautiful, like, signature CX-90 Premium Plus, but yes, you're right, it's all in the name of science, and it's fun to do. And we do say we're going to go out there and ruin the car, but the cars are actually not nearly as expensive as the crash test dummies.
Right.
Those are upwards of hundreds of thousands of dollars, and they are used over and over again. Like, it's not just a one and done. That is some of the most advanced engineering and sensor technology that there is. So it is really just a cool field to work in as an engineer, to have all of those sensors. That's what we're looking for in the vehicle. There's things that they look for in vehicle measurements and making sure there's no intrusion. But most of the data we get out of a crash test is from those crash test dummies and all the sensors. Not yet, but when you come watch one of these, you'll see in the back of the car, there's these data acquisition boxes, like just big metal boxes that have to be protected with all of the cords running into them that are helping collect that data. So it's a pretty cool thing to come see. You can see the videos on YouTube, and then come down and see it in person someday.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to want to. You've made it sound even cooler than it already looks on YouTube, with the percussion and all of that stuff. So kind of pivoting a little bit away from the technology, I always say my podcast is about the people in the industry. Like, how did you get here? How did you get to this point where you're crashing vehicles for your job?
Oh, yeah. So I grew up in really rural Iowa. And my family of very technical people. My father and grandfather, they worked for the railroad, but were big car people. And I think I just had transportation in my soul. And being in like really rural America, cars were freedom. Like, that's how you got everywhere. That's how we got to the Walmart parking lot, go hang out with our friends, or the Perkins, or, wherever you would find your friends and be social. So for me, cars were freedom. Another cool thing about growing up in the middle of rural Iowa is that we were able to get our driver's licenses when we were outside the city limits at age 14. So I've been driving since I was 14 and absolutely loving it. And I wanted to study engineering since I came from kind of a technical family. My parents were like blue collar factory workers, and I wanted to do something a bit more technical and get a degree. So I came out east and got a degree in bioengineering, and really still practice that today, in the forces, stresses, and strains on the body and how to protect occupants in cars. My first job out of college was for NHTSA, so our government branch of the Department of Transportation. I actually worked on the Firestone tire recall.
Oh boy.
Like, was in the late 90s, right? Early 2000s. I worked for NHTSA for a few years, and then took a position over at the National Transportation Safety Board as a crash investigator.
Okay.
So I worked on over 70 at scene loss of life, fatality crashes in motor coaches, trains, cars, and combinations thereof, for the better part of 15 years. I left there as an investigator in charge, and took a job here at Mazda to oversee safety. And that transition was a pretty intentional one. I'd spent probably too much time seeing the death and destruction out there, and that 40,000 people a year is not just a number to me. I've stood on the pavement. I've seen what happens. It destroys lives, families, so many people that are affected every day. And I want to be part of a solution that changes that, even gradually. This isn't something that's going to happen quickly, but I believe that through layers of technology and development, hopefully over my lifetime or a few lifetimes after that. I mean, it's going to take time, that we can really reduce that number. Of course, Mazda's vision is by 2040. That would be great. But yeah, we need to keep pushing for that. And that's where it comes from for me, just always loving cars, being around safety regulations, and then crash investigations, and now getting to crash cars that don't have people in them,
Yes.
but dummies,
Yeah.
that tell us important things about how safe the cars are.
Well, it sounds like a very smart hire on Mazda's part, bringing you on board, because that is a very impressive resume and someone I would want on the back end of my car, making sure that my vehicle is safe. Someone that, like you said, has stood on the pavement, has seen the gritty realities of what can happen. And, I look back at old movies and old cars back when there were boats, and I see Facebook posts every once in a while of how it didn't dent this car but it destroyed this car. And crumple zones are a thing that we didn't believe in years ago. It's like,
Right.
maintain its shape. Cybertruck seems to be going back to that for some odd reason, but absorbing the forces of the impact in the vehicle, not in the occupants, is
Right.
really the name of the game, is it not?
Yeah, I mean, the cars today are built so differently than they were, you know, 30, 40 years ago. It's really been so much technology, and really the structural design, that safety cage, like the things inside there can have to be protected. Everything around it, the front, the back, all of that can be completely destroyed.
Because that could be replaced. What's inside, not so much.
Yeah.
Well, Jennifer, I thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me, to share with the audience just kind of your perspective on safety, Mazda's perspective on safety, the fact that they don't see it as a luxury and that it is standard across the board. Seems like it even plays into how the IIHS tests their vehicles, because
Right.
if everything's standard across the board, you're going to be getting good ratings when they go and select their vehicles for crashes. But huge thanks to you for coming on and sharing your expertise with us.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
So yes, a very, very big thank you to Jennifer, to the entire Mazda team for helping facilitate and coordinate time to get to talk to Jennifer about Mazda's safety philosophy. The fact that the thing that stuck with me, I wrote it down here in my notebook as we were recording: safety does not have to be a luxury. I love that across the board, no matter what vehicle you get in, it's going to have their safety features baked into it. Your crash avoidance stuff, your airbags, your seatbelt pretensioners. They want to make the vehicle as safe as possible for the occupants. And then, yes, there are some new technologies coming on board that are really more luxuries at this point. But very nice to see that Mazda takes it very seriously when it comes to safety, that across the board, no matter the trim, no matter the model, you are going to get the best that they have to offer when it comes to the safety things. I know that is becoming more and more of a conversation from automakers. I've heard similar sentiments from Toyota and referenced in the episode General Motors and their plan for zero traffic or zero congestion, zero crashes, and zero emissions. safety is very much on the forefront of the conversation and engineering design philosophy for many automakers. And I just thank Jennifer and the whole Mazda team for making this episode possible. If you want to hear more from us, see all those vehicles that we've tested from Mazda and other brands, head on over to gtgaragetalk.com where you will find links to everything. Until next time, gearheads, bye.